Place tonight, breaking news as we speak, including Lara Logan's powerful rebuke of the media, a risk that may cost her a future, and also the lawyers for Nicholas Sandmann. Lin Wood, yesterday filing a $250 million lawsuit against the Washington Post. He joins us tonight with an exclusive interview. But we begin tonight with this breaking news. Empire actor Jussie Smollett has been charged with felony disorderly conduct for allegedly filing a false police report. Now, this is a Class 4 felony, punishable by up to 3 years in prison. It's a major decision now by the prosecutors, and it comes as newly uncovered surveillance video. Look at this. Shows the two brothers that have allegedly testified before the grand jury today, paid by Smollett to stage the assault. And they're purchasing multiple items that were used in what now looks like a hate crime hoax, including glasses, a ski mask, even a red hat. And earlier today, these two men literally testified before the grand jury against Smollett. Now, with evidence mounting, Smollett is in serious legal jeopardy tonight, and it could get far worse. Federal charges could also be on the way. But tonight, Smollett's attorneys, they are pushing back in a statement. It says, quote, like any other citizen, Mr. Smollett enjoys the presumption of innocence, particularly when there has been an investigation like this one, where information, both true and false, has been repeatedly leaked. Given these circumstances, we intend to conduct a thorough investigation and to mount an aggressive defense, which, by the way, we believe in due process and the presumption of innocence here on this show. But earlier today, the attorney for the two brothers that you just saw on that surveillance tape had this message for the embattled actor. Take a look.
Jussie Smollett says they're lying. What do you say to that?
I think Jussie Smollett should come clear because the truth will set him free.
Wow, powerful statement. We're going to take you live to the ground in Chicago. A full report coming up in just minutes and a lot more coming up. Sadly, what we see with Smollett is absolutely nothing new in terms of the media buying a hoax, hook, line, sinker. They go all the way in. Now, our top story tonight, Hannity watch into this abusively biased, hateful mob media in America. Remember, not so long ago, countless so-called journalists, pundits from all these other outlets threw caution to the wind in order to support Jussie Smollett and his very flawed story. I was warned early on, be careful. We didn't talk about it for a long time, waiting for the facts to come in. Now, despite the glaring red flags, they desperately wanted these wild claims and his narrative to be true. According to the mainstream media, all Trump supporters are racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. We're all monsters that want dirty air, water, and to kill grandma and kids. But their coverage of Smollett, it's only a tiny tip of the iceberg in what is a media mob coordinated character assassination that takes place so often. They are wrong so often that fake news is abundance in this country. Remember the outrageous, despicable treatment in the media of now Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh? What about the Duke lacrosse case? What about the UVA rape case? What about Ferguson, Missouri? What about Baltimore? What about the Covington high school kids? Well, now famed attorney, somebody I've known a long time, Lin Wood, has filed a massive $250 million lawsuit against the Washington Post on behalf of Nicholas Sandmann, a brutally devastating 38-page lawsuit. You can see it on Hannity.com. Lin will be here in just a few minutes. Now, his newest client, a 16-year-old, 115-pound Covington high school student who was absolutely vilified by this media mob after he was videotaped standing, saying nothing, smiling, and trying not to react to all that was going on around him. As you can see, a 64-year-old Native American activist drumming right in his face and screaming rather loudly in his face, despite showing incredible, amazing, great restraint and staying calm and doing absolutely nothing wrong. Nicholas Sandmann was repeatedly smeared, slandered, his character assassinated over and over again and again on a national stage. They falsely reported that Nicholas Sandmann approached the Native American activist. It was the other way around. They falsely reported that Nicholas Sandmann was a racist and disrespectful and mean-spirited and even physical. All of that's not true. They did all of this based on what was only a short, inconclusive 15-second clip, which showed absolutely nothing. But from print media, Hollywood actors and actresses, Democrats, cable news, major networks, nonstop, absolute, complete pile-on. Fake news, character assassination against a 16-year-old kid that it turns out did nothing wrong, except maybe wear a MAGA hat. Watch this.
Some students harassing an older Native American man, a Vietnam vet, in the midst of a special ceremony.
But Native American advocates say the video speaks for itself.
He got caught doing something that was incredibly racist and disrespectful.
It sounds like the main one who was standing right in the face of the Native American leader is already regretting some of those actions.
There were a lot of people who said that, you know, build the wall, said that was shouted.
These actions of our students are inconsistent with the teachings of our church.
And they're all jeering and they're dancing. He's got this smug look on his face. And let's not lie, everyone that sees that smug look wants to punch that kid.
That young man there does not look like someone who is appreciative and considerate of this culture and this chant going on.
I blame that kid. What a little smirk face.
And while the media mob was besmirching the character of this young Covington High School student, they essentially ignored the group of black Hebrew Israelites. We have it on tape. They could have found it in 5 minutes, that were shouting at the kids vile, racist, homophobic comments at Sandmann and his classmates. Nicholas Sandmann never responded under the most difficult circumstances. The only thing he responded was to encourage his fellow classmate not to respond. Watch and listen.
This is the religion of America. Let's make America great again. A bunch of child molesters.
That's right.
Just like your damn Donald Trump.
Look at all these dusty crackers with that racist garbage on. Look at these dirty crackers.
Wow. All the media had to do was a little bit of work, ask a few questions. They had easy access to this tape. But the media mob, they chose to rush to judgment, deny due process, guilt by accusation, and vilify and destroy the reputation of a 16-year-old kid and others. After all, he was wearing a red "Let's Make America Great Again" hat and attending, he's pro-life, a March for Life rally, which, according to so many in the media, that's a vile, bigoted act. Watch this.
It has become an invitation for confrontation. Some have even referred to the hat as a modern-day version of the Confederate battle flag.
The hat in some ways represents, for many of us, a kind of racial animus.
The MAGA hat carries a certain connotation that provokes a conditioned reaction from many people, especially for marginalized people.
Just think about the symbol of that red hat. When I see the Make America Great Again hat now, Chris, I am triggered.
Nicholas Sandmann's public persecution was widespread, all on various, almost all liberal media outlets. But the Washington Post, they were one of the ones that led the way. And Sandmann's suit affirms that. Listen to this, a 38-page brutal takedown. The Post bullied an innocent child with an absolute disregard for the pain and destruction these attacks would cause to his life. And, quote, the Post wanted to lead the charge against this child because he was nothing but a pawn in a political war against their political adversary. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz believes, and I agree with him, this is a very reasonable case with a really good chance of coming out in favor of Nicholas Sandmann against the Post, by the way, and I'd predict others. There is a ton of precedence in this. What we see with Sandmann is nothing new. You know, I met Lynn Wood, who's going to join us in a minute, in 1996. Before the year I started here at the Fox News Channel, I started in October of 96 after the Olympics was in Atlanta. He was representing Richard Jewell. 1996, in the immediate aftermath of the Olympic bombing, Richard Jewell was heralded and considered a hero after he spotted a suspicious bag. He pushed people away from the scene. He literally single-handedly saved countless lives in the process. But then the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, they pointed the finger at Richard Jewell, writing that hero guard may have planted the bomb. The media mob all piled on in that case, too. Why? Because they said he fit the vision or the profile of a lone bomber, single white man, and he lived with his mother. I happened to be on the air at that time in Atlanta. I found out later, I didn't know it at the time, Richard Jewell was actually listening to my radio show. He told me later I was the only person that didn't rush to judgment because I thought it was ridiculous. Well, just because he lives with his mother doesn't make him out to be a terrorist. I learned a valuable lesson. It has served me so well ever since. In the end, it turned out the media mob was dead wrong. I was right. Jewel was innocent, and he was a hero. Linwood likely made him a very rich man. I haven't seen the settlements. Sadly, to this day, I believe that Richard died. He died at the age of 44 from a heart attack. I guarantee you, they say stress contributes to heart attacks. I strongly believe in my heart, no medical assessment, that this so devastated Richard Jewell that it probably increased his stress load, which led to an early death. Now, we cover every controversial case. That lesson taught me not to rush to judgment in the Duke lacrosse case, the UVA rape case, Ferguson, Baltimore, Trayvon, and George Zimmerman, even the Russia collusion hoax. The media goes in their direction. They're being proven wrong. The Cambridge police acted stupidly. Even vetting Obama, who the media mob loved and refused to do. I did what they would not do. Time after time, this mob gets it wrong again and again. And the media and their friends on the left are always happy to smear, slander, besmirch anyone and everyone as long as it fits into their divisive political narrative. Now, this has been the case for decades, but it's never been this bad. In the era of Trump, it has become obvious more than ever. Let's take a look.
Is this president trying to impersonate Hugo Chavez, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Vladimir Putin?
He's not of sound mind. That's somebody that clinically you look at and say, there's something wrong there.
Donald Trump, again, being a schmuck.
We can surely say his words have absolutely emboldened white supremacists.
He has given oxygen to racists.
I think you're elevating Trump to evil, whereas having raised 3 kids, I just think he's a giant toddler.
Is it possible that she's not concerned with his mistresses because she was one of them? Is that possible?
We can no longer say Trump's the bad guy. If you vote for Trump, you're the bad guy.
Every second, every minute, every hour of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year since Trump's been president. By the way, former CBS journalist, great journalist, incredible bravery, Lara Logan summed it up perfectly. Take a look.
The media everywhere is mostly liberal, not just in the U.S. But in this country, 85% of journalists are registered Democrats. So that's just a fact, right? No one's registering Democrat when they're rarely a Republican. So the facts are on the side of what you just stated. Most journalists are left or liberal or Democrat or whatever word you want to give it. I always joke that the other 14% were too lazy to register. And there's maybe 1% that's on the right.
Yeah. Now, Lara went on to say she's probably committing professional suicide with that admission. By the way, she will join us in this show tonight. First, before we talk to Attorney Lin Wood, we have other big news. It appears the Mueller probe is finally wrapping up. Sources telling the Fox News channel the investigation is, quote, near the end game. And while the Department of Justice, the special counsel's office, have declined to comment, even fake news CNN, maybe they got something right. They're reporting Mueller could submit his findings to the Attorney General, Bob Barr, as early as next week. Earlier today, the president had a lot to say about the release of the report, saying that it is all in the hands of his new Attorney General, not him. And Justice Department rules say he decides. And according to special counsel regulations, Mueller will provide a confidential report to the Attorney General, Bob Barr, explaining the decisions reached by the special counsel. Next, the Attorney General will notify the chairs and ranking members of the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, quote, upon the conclusion of the special counsel's investigation. It is totally in the hands of the Attorney General and his alone to decide what, if any, details can be released in compliance with the law. He can control the timing of that notification over, quote, legitimate investigative or privacy concerns. Now, also remember, these regulations, they were presented to Congress, 2 decades ago by Democrats. Janet Reno, the AG, Deputy AG Eric Holder. That was after the Starr investigation. They were designed to make the special counsel more accountable to the public. But now, ironically, these same people who are outraged at Starr's authority and the release of that report are the same ones wanting to give Mueller free rein over President Trump. By the way, next week, the president and we will be with him. We'll have an interview with him in Vietnam. an important summit about the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula with Kim Jong-un, would it not be wholly inappropriate to actually release the findings when the president's out of the country participating in these high-stakes negotiations on such an important topic? Well, we also know, and I've always suspected, maybe I'll be proven wrong, Mueller's team of Democrats would love to undermine the president in any way they can. We'll have more on this later in the show. Also, huge breaking developing news by Sarah Carter and John Solomon. But first, joining us now with more on this lawsuit and what is a media mob. I got to know him in 1996, one of the most tenacious attorneys in the country. If he sent me a letter of cease and desist, I'd beg for an apology. Lynn Wood is with us. Lynn, good to see you.
Good to talk to you, Sean. Thanks for having me on.
I meant what I said about Richard Jewell. I learned a lot. It has served me well.
Well, let me say this to you. Richard Jewell always appreciated what you did for him, Sean. When the mob went after Richard, you were the sole voice in the media that urged caution and said, stop, investigate, get the facts, get it right. Nobody else did that.
I look at Nicholas
and Richard
Sandmann.
was always grateful to you for doing it.
I think the stress killed him. I think it so upset him. I look at Nicholas.
I know it did.
Sandmann, and I know now. We now know the story. This kid, you couldn't teach somebody to act more perfectly than he did under the circumstances, and it would have taken all of 7 seconds to get the truth out. Your reaction?
Well, let me tell you what the Washington Post did to Nicholas and other members of the mainstream media. You have the era of the social media now, Twitter, Facebook. Thank goodness that didn't exist back in 1996 when Richard Jewell was under attack. So this video goes viral, the mob attacks, and you would expect that the mainstream media would be responsible enough to pause, recognize they're dealing with a student, investigate, and make sure that they have the facts accurate, that the story that they tell is accurate. But they didn't pause when it came to Nicholas because they wanted to rush out and they wanted to jump into the mob, give the mob a megaphone so that they could attack this boy because he was white, he was Catholic, and he was wearing a Make America Great Again cap. If Nicholas had not purchased that souvenir cap that day at the mall, if he was not wearing it, none of us would know who Nicholas Sandmann is. He would still be living his life privately, going to school without worrying about how his school and his classmates and the world feel about him. Here's a 16-year-old kid, Sean. It's tough being 16. Think about what this young boy is having to deal with at age 16 when the entire world saw him the way the media portrayed him as literally the face of evil. It is inexcusable, reprehensible conduct by the media. And the Washington Post led the way.
Well, you also telegraphed my interpretation. I've read every word of your 38-page complaint that CNN's not far behind, NBC's not far behind. But, Lynn, I've got to imagine if you add up all media outlets in this day and age and include Hollywood actors and actresses with the fame behind and the power of the pulpit that they have, hundreds, thousands of potential lawsuits here?
Certainly hundreds. The good news is that we have 2.5 years to identify and file lawsuits against the wrongdoers. Because he's a minor, Nick will turn 18 in July of 2020. We've got 2.5 years, and we've got a lot of work to do because the social media and mainstream mob of bullies was extremely large in number, and they were very vocal. And the mainstream media, like the Washington Post, gave them a megaphone to go out and to shout to the world that this young boy had instigated this event, which he did not, had engaged in behavior swarming around Mr. Phillips, which he did not, had blocked Mr. Phillips' ability to leave the scene, which he did not. I mean, Nicholas Sandmann, as you said, Sean, he didn't do anything wrong. He exhibited the most respectful behavior of anyone involved in this incident.
You know,
He was a child. He was accosted by adults, the black Hebrew Israelites, as your clip showed, yelling the most obscene slurs at these boys, homophobic, racist slurs. And then you have this character Phillips, and I say character because let me tell you, I've watched what he said. He doesn't tell the same story twice because he's a liar. And yet the media put him on interview after interview to tell his false story and condemn this young, innocent boy.
Well, I assume that by those comments, and I think you said on Twitter that you would sue Nathan Phillips as well. You know, I watched what those kids went through and what these people said to them. They said nothing back. I don't know if I'd have that kind of restraint. It's kind of amazing. They said that he went and confronted Nathan Phillips. Just the opposite. I went through a litany of high-profile cases, Linwood. They get it wrong all the time, this mob.
Listen, you dated both of us talking about 1996. I have spent the last 23 years of my career. I'm sorry?
You still look the same.
I've spent, well, thank you. Both of our hair is a different color now than it was back then. But I've spent the last 2 decades working in the area of First Amendment law, trying to protect individuals' reputations and seek redress from false attacks. And I've watched it, Sean, deteriorate over the 2 decades. It's gotten worse and worse, and now it's reached the point where they're attacking falsely a child.
I am really...
Things have got to change, and there's got to be accountability.
And I know you don't need the money. I know that this is your passion. I am happy that they hired you. You're the best person in this. Linwood, thank you. When we come back, we'll go to Chicago. Breaking news on the Jussie Smollett and Lara Logan, exclusively on Hannity. Brutal. Joining us now with reaction is trial attorney Rebecca Rose Woodland and Fox News contributor, well, I think we're going to get to in a second, Dan Bongino is with us. Rose, let me start. You know, I read this off the top of my head. Felony disorderly conduct. Now, I know that's legal speak in this case for filing a false police report, but we now know we have the videotape of the 2 people that say he paid them money buying the very items that were used in the attack, and those 2 people went before a grand jury today before these charges were filed.
I mean, we do have a grand jury indicting. In Illinois, that's required for any case that there will be possible prison term. Here, he's facing 1 to 3 years, but his attorneys have issued a statement, and I think it is important to say he does have a presumption of innocence,
Absolutely.
as does everyone else. Possibly these 2 concocted the whole scheme and claim he did, but maybe they were the ones that did it. I'm not saying that. Based on what we have so far, that's not looking good for Smollett, but there is always a possibility that he is innocent. So I think we should take a step back. Let's see how the case proceeds.
It doesn't look good for him, I'll tell you that. Dan, we'll get to you in a second. First, joining us from Chicago is Rafer Weigel. I fired him last night, but, you know, apparently you're taking heat for doing a news report on my show in Chicago. Gee, I'm sorry. But you've been great on this story.
No, I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you, Sean. I'm grateful to be coming back on.
I do apologize for mispronouncing your name, but I think I'm just going to do it on purpose from now on. But go ahead.
No, I mean, listen, it was good TV. But, no, as you said, Sean, this does not look good for Jussie Smollett. Chicago police are essentially now accusing him publicly of making the entire thing up. And it looks like we can now start to use the word that police asked us not to use before, and that being hoax. Smollett's legal team and prosecutors met today for several hours at the Cook County Courthouse trying to work out some kind of an agreement. No agreement was reached, and therefore prosecutors put the grand jury in play. The 2 brothers, Abel and Ola Osendero, testified before that grand jury for 2.5 hours, their attorney telling me no plea deal was reached. They were not granted immunity because they did nothing wrong. Meanwhile, the evidence seems to mount that these 2 brothers did stage this event. We got surveillance video, Fox 32 obtaining surveillance video from a beauty supply store showing these 2 men walking into this store buying a red hat, ski masks, and the date of this video was January 28th. That is the day before the incident is reported. So the brothers are cooperating with police, saying Smollett put them up to it. Smollett says that they're the ones lying. The brothers' attorney says Smollett's the one not telling the truth. Take a listen. Jussie Smollett says they're lying. What do you say to that?
I think Jussie Smollett should come clear because the truth will set him free.
And that was me asking her that question. Let's give the statement from Jussie Smollett's legal team, which we got about an hour ago. Like any other citizen, Mr. Smollett enjoys the presumption of innocence, particularly when there has been an investigation like this, one where information, both true and false, has been repeatedly leaked. Given these circumstances, we intend to conduct a thorough investigation and to mount an aggressive defense. As your other guest said, a Class 4 felony, that could be 1 to 3 years in prison. Jussie Smollett is due in bond court tomorrow at 1:30. The question is, will he show up? If he doesn't, there will be a warrant issued for his arrest. Sean?
All right, Rafer Weigel reporting in Chicago tonight. Thank you for that report. We bring back in Rebecca Rose Woodland and Dan Bongino. This is really sounding more and more if the testimony is true. I do want to give due process, but it's not looking good, Dan Bongino. Is this a hate crime hoax in the making? And consider all the examples I mentioned with Lynn Wood. The media, it sounds similar. They want to believe the worst about Donald Trump and his supporters.
Yeah, I mean, the list of hate crime hoaxes goes on and on. That doesn't mean racism and hate crimes don't exist. It just means the ones that have garnered significant media attention over the last years, large swaths of them happen to be hoaxes. I mean, that's just a fact, Sean. And listen, I agree with your guest and you. Due process, of course. I mean, this is probably the only network that actually covered this case fairly from the start and didn't jump the gun. But remember, Sean, due process doesn't mean we can't think about this critically like reasonable human beings. And that's what I think you, I, and a lot of other people did from the start when there were questions, fair questions to ask. Sean, I was a street cop in the 7-5 precinct in East New York, Brooklyn. I used to walk a post at from 6 o'clock at night to 2 o'clock in the morning. You see a couple of guys on a relatively empty street in an industrial area at 2 o'clock in the morning with bleach and a noose, wearing MAGA hats with no one else around. It may not be reasonable suspicion to pull them over, but it's probably worth giving them an extra look. Nobody thought this was unusual, this story, that some people just were carrying around bleach in the middle of the night to randomly attack an actor and in this show. It just...
In a 4-degree weather
minor
in a
amount
storm.
of critical thinking would have...
You know, I did what I did.
Red flags should have went off everywhere.
You know, Rebecca, I did what I did in the Zimmerman-Trayvon case. I actually went there and talked to the people. In the Duke Lacrosse case, I talked to some of the parents and some of the kids. When the rest of the mob rushed to judgment, they're wrong so often. Now, when do they start getting held accountable? Because you look at the Smollett case, you look at these Covington kids and Nicholas Sandmann, there's a lot of similarities here.
A lot of similarities, Sean. I remember I was here for the Duke case with you. I was here for Trayvon Martin with you.
You were on the right side with me. That's right.
And what's unfortunate here is if Jussie did this, why? Why are you playing into such hate, such negativity, when there's such an opportunity now to bring people together?
But but the media has a narrative. And the reason the media jumps and they don't look, like, it would have taken them 6 seconds to find out the truth in the Nicholas Sandmann case.
Oh, I know.
Not even a phone call did these people make. They're going to lose. Lynn Wood is going to destroy every one of these big media outlets. I guarantee it. It's a slam dunk, and they will all pay.
Sure. And in this situation, we should have that again. I mean, there is no reason why everyone has to jump to judgment with the MAGA hat. It is ridiculous.
15 last seconds. Dan.
Sean, listen, you asked who's going to hold the media accountable. It's already happening. The court of public opinion is all that matters, and very few people trust the media anymore like they used to 50 or 60 years ago.
Thank you both. When we come back, huge breaking news on the deep state. Get this. Turns out the FBI's top lawyer wanted to charge Hillary Clinton. Sarah Carter, John Solomon have the latest. And also later tonight, former CBS reporter Lara Logan risking her career exposing media bias. That's straight ahead.
Your favorite shows on Channel 114. Plus, every story, every 15 minutes. Fox News headlines 24/7, Channel 115.
Well, he's a tremendous man, a tremendous person who
really respects this country and respects the Justice Department. So that'll be totally up to him.
Yeah, and by the way, Democrats, Janet Reno, Eric Holder, they were pushing that. President Trump earlier today making it clear that it is up to the Attorney General, William Barr, on whatever release or no release of Mueller's findings. Tonight, we do have major developments, Hannity watch on the deep state, unelected bureaucrats caught trying to undermine President Trump. First, to prevent him from getting elected, and then to undermine his election and undo the will of the American people and their blind loyalty to James Comey. All right, with our reports tonight, Sarah Carter and John Solomon reporting. Former top FBI lawyer James Baker believed the Clintons' use of a private server was, in fact, enough to secure an indictment and charge her for violations under the Espionage Act. And I'll add, yeah, deleting subpoenaed emails is another thing. Baker suspiciously changes his mind after discussions with Comey. Of course, a Clinton lover and other senior officials. Remember, it was disgraced FBI official Andrew McCabe ramped up his efforts to undermine the president after Comey was fired in May of 2017. Oh, and don't forget, well, maybe we'll tape the president. Maybe we'll invoke the 25th Amendment. Here now, the Hill's John Solomon with his report also about a possible third dirty dossier. Yep, Bruce Orr's wife, Nellie. Yeah, she produced it. John Solomon from The Hill and Fox News contributor, Sarah Carter, investigative reporter. Sarah, let's start with the FBI issue first. And both you and John report this, that Baker originally believed what we all know is a fact. Hillary Clinton committed a felony that was the violation of the Espionage Act, and I believe obstruction of justice after, and they rigged the investigation.
Yeah, Sean, what's so fascinating about Baker's testimony is that he's going through this back and forth with John Ratcliffe out of Texas, who's questioning him about this. And he specifically states that he absolutely believed from the beginning, when he went through this binder, he was basically given a binder with the classified emails, with documents. He was appalled. He didn't see any other way around it but to charge Hillary Clinton. And he continued to battle, according to his own testimony, with people in his office, along with Comey as well. He had these arguments going back and forth until the very end. And it wasn't until the very end that he changed his mind. But more importantly, when Ratcliffe questions him again, and he says, do you still believe it is appalling what happened, the mishandling of these classified documents, which Baker himself describes as highly classified documents? He said yes. He basically said yes. Even to this day, he believes it was appalling. I think the question is, why at the very end did he
because
jump
the answer
and
is
change?
they wrote an exoneration in May.
That's right.
Strzok, who said Clinton should win $100 million to zero, he conducted the interview. The fix was in. She got away with stuff no other American citizen could ever get away with. And then the dossier, the Russian lies, ironically, never investigated, lying to the FISA court, then using it to sabotage and unseat a duly elected president. John Solomon, you report on this as well as the third dossier written by and produced by Nellie Orr, Bruce's wife.
Yeah, I'm really struck today. Sean, early in the show, you talked about how much the story shifted on Covington, how much it shifted on the attack in Chicago. Think about how much these two stories on Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have shifted from what the media originally reported, what we now know today. For a long time, the FBI said everyone was in unanimity about not charging Hillary Clinton. Now we find out to the very last minute James Baker is fighting and disagreeing with that decision. And when we started, we were told that the Trump investigation had to be open because there was actionable foreign intelligence suggesting he was compromised. Now we know that intelligence was nothing more than Christopher Steele and Sidney Blumenthal. After learning what Christopher Steele sent to the FBI, I report that Bruce Orr told the Congress his wife put her own dossier together, put it on a memory stick, gave it to him, and he routed it to the FBI, despite the fact that there are conflict of interest rules that say justice officials should never get involved in cases where their spouse has a financial interest. It's remarkable. This story has evolved so much.
We only have a small sampling of all these interviews. We don't. There's so much information. Do you both agree with me? Exit question. That, in fact, when everything comes out, there's at least probably a dozen people that should be charged here? Sarah?
Yes, absolutely, if not more.
If not more, how many more?
Yeah,
I would say definitely between 12 and 20.
And John?
Yep, the House Republicans who did all these interviews, they're preparing criminal referrals right now. I'm told at least 9 they're going to make right off the bat.
All right.
Yeah.
Real quick, John, you have sources in the special counsel's office. What are you hearing about what will be in this report supposedly released next week? Real quick.
I think the end is near, and I think there will be no charges against the president recommended.
No Russia collusion. 2 years. Wow. Of media lies, the mob mentality.